Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. All right, let's do a little testing of the equipment. If you wouldn't mind helping me out in the chat room there. I'm rustling up the cattle there, George. That's what you're hearing for rustling. All right, very good. Excellent. Thank you, Sharon. Never quite know. I'll put it back on our scriptures for the evening. Haven't seen Doug Diamond jump in here yet, but welcome, Shalom, Sharon, George. Get a few people in here to get started. Shalom. We'll do our 15 minutes of news headlines to set us up, and then we'll jump right into those stories. I sent you all of them, I believe, except maybe one ahead of time. Just as a little preview for those of you that are joining here early, Sunday, I believe Kathleen and I are going to be speaking about the Temple of Technology, the abomination of desolation that sets up in the Temple of Technology. The abomination is taking place within our bodies as the temple for the Holy Spirit. And people are waiting for the building of the third temple, of course, but they're not paying attention in the meantime to the attack on the existing temple, which is the only temple that God recognizes, and that is our human body. So it's just like Satan to be attacking the temple now while everybody else is distracted and paying attention to the building of a building. Very clever. So we're probably going to expand upon that on Sunday. Tamara is here. And Tamara, I apologize if, we missed your question in the chat room regarding Gemini in the last live stream. I think you sent the question to Kathleen since then, and if you have, I think she's responding to you, but feel free to send it to me. I still never saw an email regarding that topic of Gemini into my email inbox, so happy to address it. Don't want to ignore anyone, so happy to do that. So far so good, and my tabs are still open, and it looks like we're going to be able to lift off right at 7 o'clock Eastern Time, our scheduled departure on Patch Air. It's interesting that there have been several live streams of late that right as I go on the air at 7 o'clock, it gets cut. So prayers against that, prayers that everything is intact this evening. We have plenty to cover, as you can tell by the things I've sent to you. Welcome, Susan. Good to see you back. It's getting cold here in New England. I'm glad the heat is dissipating. I'm done with heat. I'm very much a polar bear. I love the cold. Alrighty, so let's get the camera going. Have to fix my hair. There we go. Ah, well, such is the vanity. All right, Doug's here. Excellent. Thank you, Doug, for popping in. And we'll start right away. I'm going to give a countdown to 3, Doug, and we will start on the news broadcast for the evening. 1, 2, and 3. Welcome. My name is Anthony Patch, and we are going to cover 4, perhaps 5 news items today. Take us about 15 minutes, thereabouts, and I appreciate you tuning in for a few moments. First one is a story that you probably have heard already this week. Was first released in August, and that is Elon Musk and his Neuralink. And again, I'm just giving you the headlines for you to go ahead and search these out for yourself and take a look at the articles. If you'd like to hear my commentary on these topics, please join us on Patreon, Anthony Patch on Patreon. So Elon Musk and Neuralink, something that patrons and myself have covered extensively, and also in the pages of my monthly magazine, Entangled Magazine. We have published several breakdowns on the nuts and bolts of technology of the Neuralink. It's entitled here on Ars Technica, both an evolution and a plan for radical change. Again, dated August of this year. So Elon is presenting a technology that robotically inserts very fine tubes into the human brain to act as sending and receiving antenna associated with groups of neurons at any one time, not into a neuron itself, but alongside neurons. And this is the machine-human interface, the brain-computer interface, BCI as it's known. Okay, so I won't go into that too much because most of you have probably heard of that already. The second one I'd like to highlight is from Zuckerberg, Mark Zuckerberg, and his wife, who happens to be a pediatrician, and they have created a organization known as Chan Zuckerberg Biohub. His wife's last name is Chan, and this is the map of every cell in the human body. That's their goal. Now, you may recall that there was about 5 years ago the mapping of the human genome that was accomplished. And underway now for the last 2.5 years has been the mapping of the human brain. And it is Zuckerberg and his wife who are, through their organization, Chan Zuckerberg Biohub, funded by the sale of 29 million shares in Facebook around February of this year. They are seeking to map every cell in the human body. You'll see a common thread moving through these headlines this evening. Next, I'd like to go to something that many people, especially Christians, would refer to as the mark of the beast. And again, this is something that has been going on for over a year now in Sweden and in Europe in general. But the headline here is the star of the 39th GitTex that's GITEX, GITEX Technology Week in Dubai, is a human implantable NFC microchip that is capturing the attention of United Arab Emirates. The demonstration of the implantable microchip NFC card was shown at the GITEX Technology Week 2019, which ended on 10 October. Several ministries, including the Ministry of Health and Ministry of Finance, showed interest in the technology and are in talks with the Swedish firm. The rice grain-sized biocompatible NFC implant can be inserted just under the skin between the index finger and thumb. The chip can be injected under the skin like a vaccine shot, explained Johan Osterlund, the founder and CEO of Biohacks. That's BIOHAX, Biohacks International. Okay, so what they are essentially spreading is the device that they intend to use to link up humans to the hive mind. And again, we've covered this in great detail in both my magazine and in Patreon broadcasts over the last couple of years. Now here's a news story, and this really caught my attention today because it really coalesces a lot of the technologies that we cover, and that is from news.com.au, story that broke today. Terminally ill scientist with motor neuron disease transforms into the world's first cyborg by replacing body parts with machinery. A world-renowned roboticist dying from motor neuron disease is transforming himself into a robot to extend his life. Now, he has ALS, which is Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a neurodegenerative disorder that essentially renders yourself unable to breathe, unable to speak, unable to move. And he is currently wheelchair bound, but he intends to replace the muscular functions of his body, such as breathing, respiratory drive, and his ability to move his limbs, which are affected by ALS, and also the ability for the digestive system, the muscles of the digestive system, to digest food and excrete waste products. All of these will be replaced by robotic systems, if you will, by machinery. So it's not that he's swapping out his organs, he's simply taking the muscular system that is being rendered non-functional and allowing machinery technology to take over. But he'll still be rendered, essentially wheelchair bound. In Europe and in Australia, they call it MND for the ALS disorder. But what he is doing is, most recently now, he is connecting himself up to a ventilator through a tracheotomy, which is inserting just below the vocal cords a breathing tube for a ventilator, so he will no longer be able to speak. His name is Dr. Scott Morgan of Torquay, England. He said, "When I say cyborg, I don't just mean any old cyborg, you understand, but by far the most advanced cybernetic organism ever created in 13.8 billion years. He says, I'm scheduled to become the world's very first full cyborg. So again, this is Dr. Scott Morgan. It's hyphenated, Dr. Scott Morgan. And he's already created an avatar of himself so that this avatar will take over for him, as well as, of course, speaking for him, because with the ventilator, he'll no longer be able to speak. So, very first human cyborg, apparently, according to this article. Again, you can find this at news.com.au. Now, let's go to the last article here, and this is another whistleblower. This is from Breitbart, and this came out a few days ago, but it's a whistleblower that's unrelated to Donald Trump. Whistleblower Google partners with China on AI Manhattan project. And you may recall that The Manhattan Project label stems from the development of the first atomic bomb here in the United States. Former Google senior software developer and whistleblower Zach Voorhees appeared on SiriusXM's Breitbart News Tonight with host Rebecca Mansour on Friday to discuss Google's relationship with Communist China and the company's artificial intelligence project, DeepMind, which has been called the, quote, AI Manhattan Project. Now, we highlighted some of the revelations early on that came out by way of Zach Voorhees, and he was on Project Veritas at that time. And now he's coming out with a little bit more information, and that's regarding China. Now, as background, the research that I've been providing to my patrons regarding AI and Google and China also includes D-Wave, quantum computing systems. And it's a little known, but the patrons know this because I announced this over 2 years ago, and we've repeated it, that China took delivery of a $10 million quantum computer from D-Wave Systems of Canada. And that is being used specifically for the development of artificial general intelligence, the leading edge, the most advanced form of artificial intelligence through quantum computing. So about 2 weeks ago, I announced that Google had claimed quantum supremacy over classical transistor-based quantum computers. And again, we've published in the October issue of Entangle magazine pretty much all of the necessary nuts and bolts hardware background and mathematics to define and describe and show you the implications for using the word supremacy. And it is a word you're going to see a lot more in the media, both scientific and mainstream, and even in the alternative media, the word supremacy regarding quantum computers and as applied to artificial intelligence. So the overall message for these news items tonight is the human cyborg, that the push is to take all scientific disciplines and merge them together with the focal point of defeating death. It's well beyond this, sort of Ray Kurzweil, Johnny Depp, if you will, scenario of uploading your consciousness into a computer. What they're focused on is creating synthetic life forms, including Sanctuary.ai that I've mentioned to you in the last news brief. The goal is to create cyborgs. The goal is to replace the human race, but this will not be for the average person. This is going to be for those elite few who will have access to these technologies. It begs the question, with over 7 billion people on the planet, why do we need synthetic life forms? Why do we need cyborgs? Certainly in the case of ALS and other debilitating diseases and deformities, it's nice to have an alternative. But what quality of life? That's the bigger question. What quality of life would an individual experience as a cyborg in a body that is either enhanced and augmented, as I was just sharing with you, or an actual fully synthetic body, a biologically synthetic body that you would transfer your consciousness to, if that was possible? What would be your quality of life? Well, from a Christian perspective, that, along with the mark of the beast that I just mentioned, the taking of the chip, the taking of the mark, the quality of life is severely substandard, to say the least. Okay, so I just wanted to give you those brief highlights. The goal is that you'll take those topics and research it on your own. If you'd like to listen to my commentary on these, join us on Patreon. And I'm encouraging my patrons to also support Caravan to Midnight by becoming a member of Caravan to Midnight with John B. Wells. And John B. and I have been in close communications over the last week or so, working out the logistics of these news briefs. He likes to call me his science officer now, and that's fine with me. But that's essentially what we'll do for the near future, just these little news briefs. Maybe it'll expand to longer segments. We'll see what happens. But the point is we have similar interests, John and myself. He covering a lot of the politics, myself covering the science. But the two need to be merged together because they're directly influential upon one another. And the caravanners and the patrons in the Patreon group that we have here, we are of similar viewpoints. And I think it's important that we bring the two audiences, the two groups together, so that we're able to sort of cross-pollinate, if you will, our information, the information that John is presenting, the information that I'm presenting, so that you have a broader picture of what's going on with the world and you're better informed, and certainly to reduce any of the fear due to a lack of knowledge, reduce that fear factor, if you will. So thank you for the opportunity to address you, and we will do so once again. This being Wednesday, I'll be broadcasting again on Thursday. A little delay in the scheduling when it comes out through Caravan to Midnight, but essentially germane to these news broadcasts are the live streams that you can find in the archives through my Patreon site at Anthony Patch. Also, anthonypatch.com. Links to everything, including Entangled Magazine. Thank you, and good evening. Okay, Doug, we can cut it right there. All right, guys, I'm glad we got through that. I'm not much of a news broadcaster, but I appreciate you letting me do this. It's a little different for us, but I have said before, I think it serves the purpose for YouTube, where this little news segment is broadcast to the public, to invite them to join us on Patreon and hear the full discussion. It's a good introduction, and it's also good in the archives for patrons to be able to just listen to, you know, the introduction for 15 minutes, and if they want to listen to the balance of the 2-hour presentation, then they can if they find the topics to be of interest. So I think it kind of washes both hands, both ways. And I haven't heard any pushback from any of the patrons and from any of you, so I guess it's okay. I guess it's all right. So let's move on. All right, alrighty. I see Kathleen has joined us. Welcome. Joyce is here. Andy is here. Welcome. All right. And Deborah. Here we go. So, at 7 p.m. Eastern Time is the start of our live streams. Again, for the benefit of new patrons, I've included the mention of Elon Musk and his Neuralink, and also Mark Zuckerberg, and he and Dr. Chan, who are putting together this mapping of all of the cells in the human body. And that's kind of new news for us, this mapping of the human body. Again, the human genome, and now the mapping of the human brain, and that's being done by Dr. George Church. And I referred to Dr. Church in the last live stream, last Thursday, regarding DNA modification, the modification of the human genome, and the artificial DNA construct of human DNA. Dr. George Church is a person that I've recommended that you look into his background at Harvard regarding DNA research, but over in Switzerland, in Geneva, Dr. George Church is also involved. He founded an institute for mapping of the human genome, and it's interesting, so much happens in Geneva. That's where CERN is located. So for about 2 years now, his institute in Switzerland has been working on mapping the human neurons. So a lot of mapping going on, and as you know, in artificial intelligence, AI is very well equipped at mapping. Discovering patterns results in mapping, results in modeling, in silico, modeling of whatever it is you're looking at. So modeling of the human neurons, the interconnections by way of the synapses, the mapping of the dendrites and how they're formed, and mapping the electrical pathways between neurons, how that they are established and connected, and then disconnected, and those patterns which result in thoughts, in memories, in imagination, creativity, and in sentient. And so they are trying to map all of these things now, according to Zuckerberg's group, all of the cells in the human body. Again, this all speaks to what I don't think is really conjecture on my part. Again, it's more extrapolation of the existing scientific research that at least has been made public to us at this point. The extrapolation rather than conjecture that biological synthetic life forms are being created if they have not already been fully formed and fully created. It's my position, and until I'm shown otherwise, I believe that in laboratories there are already in existence, and have been for several years, fully formed humanoid cyborg synthetic humans. Not nuts and bolts and not plastic, but biological. Because if you have the ability to in silico, which was the very first article I published back in January of 2013, I published in a different publication, not Entangled, but in another magazine. My first article ever published had to do with in silico DNA, the modeling of human DNA and the modification of it, and then the ability to produce from human and animal DNA a synthetic life form. Synthetic in the sense that it is not a God-created pattern of DNA, but a human-created, not creating life. There's a obvious distinction between creating a new biological life form from existing living biological material, okay, and creating life. The two are completely separate. We're not talking about man creating life, so please don't misunderstand or misquote me. What I'm talking about is they're taking things like Ebola as a living organism and then adding to it the basic building blocks of DNA. So life already exists. What they're doing is building that replication process upon the pre-existing substrate. Now that is a process in the public literature that is at least 6 years old, and I've described it now for 6 years, since 2013. And again, Dr. Craig Venter, V-E-N-T-E-R, I've referenced many times, is the one that's been the leader in that area. So if we simply take 6-year-old technology, and it may be much older than that, and extrapolate their development, I think we arrive at the present time with biologically grown from DNA that has been in the computer, in silico, modeled first until they have been able to create in the computer model that which they seek, and then they output it through 3D bioprinters, again using a living substrate to build upon. So when we look at an individual, and I'm going to go over to Dr. Peter Scott Morgan real quickly, and then we're going to our scripture. This is the human on the left before he was diagnosed with ALS and before he was confined to a wheelchair. And this is an image of his avatar on the right-hand side that he's created for himself, which, because he's losing the ability to speak, losing the facial muscles, along with other loss of muscular control throughout his body, he's created a synthetic avatar of himself that will speak for him, because he's undergoing a process now of inserting just below the trachea, just below the larynx, a breathing tube, a ventilator tube, performing a tracheotomy, putting in a stoma, inserting a tube. So that will provide him the ability to breathe by way of a ventilator, but no air will pass through the vocal cords, so he won't be able to speak, plus the loss of motor muscular control in the face anyway. Okay, so we'll come back to Dr. Peter Scott Morgan in detail here in just a moment, but I would like to go to our scriptures. before I get too long-winded with my opening monologue here. Isaiah 5, chapter 5, verses 20 through 21. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who turn darkness to light and light to darkness, who replace bitter with sweet and sweet with bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Very apropos to what we're discussing this evening. I also like to reference over to Matthew 24, verses 9 through 14. Again, very familiar to you. But in the context of the technologies that we've been discussing, please consider these. Verse 9. Then they will deliver you over to be persecuted and killed, and you will be hated by all nations on account of my name. At that time many will fall away and betray and hate one another, and many false prophets will arise and mislead many. Because of the multiplication of wickedness, the love of most will grow cold. But the one who perseveres to the end will be saved. And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a testimony to all nations. And then the end will come. So we overlay that into our discussion this evening. Let's go back to Dr. Morgan. And this is his demonstrating his wheelchair, which can place him in various positions and also can move him about and also place him in a standing position. But he is moving, as I'm going to describe for you, towards recreating himself as Peter 2.0, he calls. That's his reference, Peter 2.0, a fully formed cyborg. Okay. Give me just a moment to get my links open here. All right. Come on. Here we go. They get pushed down because there's so many emails that stream in behind me. Let's get the article open and we'll go through this. I want to go through his background from his own website. He says, tomorrow, and he's talking about the tracheotomy for the ventilator, tomorrow I trade my voice for potentially decades of life as we complete the final medical procedure for my transition to full cyborg. The month I was told statistically I would be dead. He's undergoing this procedure. He says, I'm not dying, I'm transforming. Oh, how I love science. Almost everything about me is going to be irreversibly changed, body and brain. It goes without saying that all my physical interaction with the world will become robotic, and naturally my existing 5 senses are going to be enhanced. But far more importantly, part of my brain and all of my external persona will soon be electronic, totally synthetic. From then on, I'll be part hardware, part wetware, part digital, and part analog. And it won't stop there. I've got more upgrades in progress than Microsoft. Mine isn't just a version change, it's a metamorphosis. So, I'd like to take you to his personal website. I sent this to one of our patrons. I don't think I sent this to you, so I'm going to read you the link so you can type this in for yourself. Scott-Morgan.com/blog/. So that's SCOT-Morgan.com/blog/. This is his blog post, Dr. Peter B. Scott-Morgan. So we're going to extract from this because you need to hear his personal background as well. Dr. Peter Bowman Scott Morgan. Now the reason I'm talking about him is this is, as I love to say, this is a touch point. Understand the primary focus in Silicon Valley, and when I say Silicon Valley, I'm talking about really the greater world of technology. But the venture capital has been targeting the defeat of death, defeating prescribing human longevity. They are seeking immortality. They are seeking to be as gods. So this gentleman, this doctor, provides us that touch point of the broader mindset within the technocrats, within the world of technology. This is what they seek. This is how they view their future. He just happens to be an example of it. Okay? So that's why I'm going to spend some time really trying to focus on this. Because it speaks to the mindset. It speaks to the spirit. And you'll see why when I show you his personal background in this. It speaks to the spirit that is at work here. Dr. Peter Bowman Scott Morgan is an English-American roboticist. Now, if that is not irony, I'm not talking Iron Man, the fact that he is a roboticist and he is suffering from Lou Gehrig's disease, a neurodegenerative, neuromuscular degenerative disease, much like Dr. Stephen Hawking, who's now deceased, I would offer this. Perhaps God was trying to get Dr. Hawking's and Dr. Scott Morgan's attention. I'll let you decide on that one. But the height of irony, he is a roboticist who is working with leading experts and mega corporations such as Intel and DXC Technology, all researching together how to apply cutting-edge, high-tech to thrive with extreme disability. He is the subject of a primetime Channel 4 documentary chronicling his journey to become the world's first cyborg, due to be aired early 2020. Now this is in the United Kingdom. As well as a book and associated podcasts. He is in the process of forming a charitable foundation dedicated to changing what it means to be human. Okay? Dedicated to changing what it means to be human. I understand disabilities and diseases. I get it. But this is going way beyond that. And you can appreciate that. Earlier in his career, Peter translated his expertise in complex systems dynamics into pioneering techniques to decode the hidden inner workings of society so as to predict and selectively rewrite strands of the future. Now take that sentence from everything I've given you about quantum computing and artificial intelligence, that it is about predicting the future, is it not? And is it not for the rewriting of the human race, what the Kabbalists refer to as tikkun, the redemption of the human race? Not through Jesus Christ, but through the Antichrist system. Okay? So with that emphasis, allow me just to reread part of that sentence. Peter translated his expertise in complex system dynamics into pioneering techniques to decode. Okay? We talk all about decrypting encrypted codes. Peter Shor's algorithms, 2048 and 4096, that's at the heart of quantum computing, is decoding. Okay, and that's applied here biologically. It's applied to decoding DNA, quantum computing, and AI. Decoding is done by detecting hidden patterns. So he's saying here, techniques to decode the hidden inner workings of society so as to predict and selectively rewrite strands of the future. Now, the basis of AI was pattern recognition by observing the behavior of humans, the behavior of society. And why? For the control of society. How do you control society? By predicting the future actions of the societies. The whole thing is right there in this one sentence. He is the foremost authority on the, quote, unwritten rules, unquote, that organizations, social groups, cultures, and global systems follow to dictate how they will evolve. He's the foremost authority on the unwritten rules that organizations, social groups, cultures, and global systems follow that dictate how they will evolve. Let's unpack that. What does it mean? It means that there are hidden patterns within organizations, social groups, cultures, and global systems. And those patterns dictate the evolution of those groups, according to scientists. Detecting the patterns allows them to predict the future. This is what this gentleman has been involved in. Is this perhaps why he is suffering ALS? Is this perhaps God trying to grab him by the lapels and wake him up to what he's involved in? Let's continue. He's been granted unparalleled confidential access across North America, Europe, Asia Pacific, and Latin America to analyze, now listen to this, to analyze the secret reality of institutions, government organizations, and corporations, including many of the major players in banking, healthcare, transport, energy, chemicals, IT, telecoms, retail, manufacturing, entertainment, and media. He has uncovered innumerable serious systemic threats, as well as advised leaders around the world how best to respond to them. Apply our 180 technique to this entire paragraph, if you would, please. Why is this doctor being granted unparalleled confidential access across virtually the entire world to analyze secret realities of institutions, government organizations, and corporations? Why? He is ostensibly, if he's being granted this kind of access, number one, he's trusted by these organizations. Number two, he has some type of unique ability to identify these patterns that he's labeling as a secret reality. The secret reality, the translation of that is discovering the patterns within the data. One of the offshoot companies of D-Wave quantum computing systems, I haven't spoken about in a long time, is Quadrant. Ostensibly their business unit, D-Wave's business unit, for identifying hidden patterns within data. Quadrant. Quadrant is what has been used for centuries in geomancy. Crowley used it. He called it the Great Table of the Earth, the 4 quadrants. Quadrant. It's not by chance that they name the business unit utilizing quantum computing to analyze and discover secret patterns. I would offer to you, and this is pure conjecture, that this gentleman has access to a D-Wave quantum computer. probably many of these institutions and governmental organizations that he's accessing have D-Wave computers, or through the cloud, through the LEAP program at D-Wave, they have cloud-based access that D-Wave sells that access to corporations and governments without having to buy the actual computer. But isn't it interesting? Here's an individual who's self-creating himself, recreating himself as a cyborg, and he talks about the secret reality of these organizations. Secret reality means identifying of patterns for the purpose, and here's the 180, folks. Secret reality speaks to the sentient world simulation that I've explained at length about. That is the digital reality that they use to monitor everything on the planet, every human, every system, environmental, etc. All gets fed into quantum computers to identify patterns. That's the primary function of quantum computing, identification of patterns for the purpose of predicting the future. And it says right here in this same article, the very same thing I've been talking about for years. Let's continue. Having spent roughly equal periods of his career living in the US and the UK, he currently lives in Torquay, England, with his husband, Francis. Can I say that again? In Torquay, England, with his husband, Francis. That's a man. There is your first indicator of the spirit that is at work through Dr. Scott-Morgan. They have been a couple since 1979. On 21st of December of 2005, they were granted the first ceremony on the first day civil partnerships became legal. In 2009, this was retrospectively recognized as having been a full marriage. In 2017, Peter was diagnosed with motor neuron disease, MND, also called ALS or Lou Gehrig's disease, and given 2 years to live. That was in 2017. Far from this being a setback, he views it as an unrepeatable opportunity to conduct breakthrough research based on his unique insight into how high-tech will evolve, and having now analyzed the unwritten rules of clinical care for MND, he plans not just to survive, but thrive for decades, and to ensure that the lessons learned can help everybody with extreme disability, even when caused simply by old age. To him, this research is quite literally the experiment of his life. Do you hear the Garden of Eden discussion going on? I want to go to his frequently asked questions from his site. So if you're following along with me, we're going to FAQs. Again, very telling, and I'll go through this a little more rapidly now that I've kind of given you the 180 on his statements. Question: what is your single message that people should know? Answer: as most scientists agree, a full cure for MND, certainly a pharmaceutical cure that could reverse the major damage in people like me, may still be decades away. But despite that, MND's reign of terror is about to end. When I was diagnosed with MND, I was told my disease had no effective treatment and was invariably fatal. As a scientist, I believe both these statements now to be false. Unquestioned dogma passed on by rote. I have to go back to our scriptures here. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who turn darkness to light and light to darkness, who replace bitter with sweet and sweet to bitter. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their sight. I'm highlighting that again because what Kathleen and I have been bringing up in the last several live streams is this whole concept that because knowledge is increasing, we can bring in the discussion of technology into the scriptures. We can go deeper into the scriptures by overlaying our understanding, our knowledge of technology. And it comes to life through the scriptures. The spirit that's driving technology, which is Luciferian, the attitude, the paradigm, the personality of people that are involved in this development of technologies for the replacement of the human race, for the destruction of what God has created in his own image, purely Luciferian, and shows you again the hubris of these people through Scripture by overlaying the technology and their own words, their own description. And that's what we're sharing with you tonight. This is a window into the greater body of scientific research and development that's going on. In reality, there are about to be an exploding range of effective treatments, but they're high-tech, not biotech. What's more, with the correct high-tech support, I may die of cancer or heart disease, not MND. I fully accept that to a medical scientist, MND can look very much like an untreatable terminal disease. But if you're a technology scientist like me, MND is a treatable chronic disease. You see how full of themselves they are? Let's go to the next question. What is the most important thing you've learned from your experience of living with MND? His answer: by far, my most important discovery has been that MND is not the invariably fatal disease that it's usually described as, even by those with scientific backgrounds who ought to know better. In reality, those of us with MND nearly all die from lack of food, or more commonly, lack of air. These are engineering issues, not really medical ones at all. Our guts and our lungs carry on working perfectly. It's only the muscles needed to get food and air in that shut down. That's relatively easily solved by a feeding tube, non-invasive ventilation, and in due course, when NIV becomes more difficult, by tracheostomy invasive ventilation. Without those, we die. With them, MND is closer to an untreatable chronic rather than terminal disease. With the right engineering and with a bit of luck, we may, after a long life, eventually die of heart disease or cancer rather than MND. But for a variety of reasons, in the UK, less than 1% of us choose to have the interventions needed to stay alive. So most of us die within 2 years of diagnosis, just as it was 50 years ago. Personally, I think that's a shame. Next question. I understand that you wrote a book called The Robotic Revolution. How can robotics assist someone living with MND? Answer: yes, that was my first book. My PhD in my early 20s was in robotics, and ever since then, I've remained passionate about the exponentially growing power of high tech to transform everybody's lives. All right, I need to stop there and interject. Do you see the word exponentially growing, the two words exponentially growing? You've heard me say that about AI and technology in general. That's been my observation. Here it is. He's confirming what I've been saying. The exponentially growing power of high tech. Now recall back with Google when we talked about the supremacy that they claim over classical computing, that Dr. Nevin has a, quote, law called Nevin's law to replace the notion of the doubling of transistors every 2 years, Moore's law, to the doubling of doubling, double D's, the doubling of doubling, the doubling of exponential. Exponential is a doubling by itself, but Google claiming now that their quantum supremacy, their chipset, is doubling the doubling of the exponential. And it took them quite by surprise, and it is accelerating in its doubling of doubling without any influence, without any manipulation or input by the scientists, by the mathematicians. It's taken on a life of its own, and it has because of the spirit that's involved here. They don't go so far to say that there is a spirit that is causing this doubling of doubling effect within their quantum computing chipset. But you and I know that this is a machine that is indwelt by one or more demonic spirits, because you cannot separate the spiritual from the physical. And the spiritual is manifesting in this doubling of doubling, Nevin's law. So now you have a person, I would say, of a very similar spirit, certainly I think indwelt by a Luciferian spirit, judging by the fruits of his labor, I make that statement, saying there's an exponentially growing power of high tech to transform everybody's lives. He's speaking of the goal of the spirit that drives him, the transformation of God's creation. Purely Luciferian in its goal. And I might again add, it is Kabbalistic, because it is the pushing through technology of their redemption of humanity apart from the redemption of Jesus Christ. Let's continue. His answer again. So, as you'd expect, I see robotics and high tech as the first line of defense against MMD. Literally within 5 seconds of getting my diagnosis and after the initial emotion of surprise, my very first coherent thought was, this is only a problem of my voluntary muscles and the part of my brain that controls them. We've been using electromechanics and AI. You hear it, folks? Electromechanics and AI to substitute for those, and here's the word, to substitute for those for decades. Again, it is not conjecture on my part or in your thinking to assume that the technologies that are coming to light today are decades, perhaps many decades old. And we're just being shown what I would consider to be obsolete information. But he says right here, we've been using electromechanics and AI to substitute for those for decades. They've been working on the cyborg, the human cyborg, for decades, folks. He's giving you a glimpse. We use the 180 technique to reveal the truth of what's going on. We turn their words around, and it reveals the truth. Let's continue. I'm on my home territory with this one. It's a solvable problem, thank goodness. Well, he doesn't thank God, does he? Let's go to the next question. If you could leave Earth with one legacy, what would it be? Question or answer. Simple. To forever change the world. Just take that in. Put on the t-shirt of hubris. To forever change the world so that anyone with extreme disability, even through old age, can choose not only to stay alive, but to use high tech to thrive. Nothing more, nothing less. Let's take this statement, can choose not only to stay alive. That speaks to me of the mark of the beast. That's why I shared that other article about the grain size, the rice grain sized implant into the hand. That's technology you and I have seen for probably 15 years being discussed. Okay, that's not going to be the mark of the beast, trust me. It's going to be the third strand of DNA manifesting externally as a mark on the forehead or on the hand. But it's that choice. See the words here? This is spiritually written language here, folks. Can choose not only to stay alive, but to use high tech to thrive. This is the scenario that will lead people. It is a type of scenario. I still think the primary scenario is going to be a pandemic that will cause people through the Hegelian dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, to demand the vaccine against I think will be a genetically modified, man-made pandemic disease. But the vaccine will be a vaccine that will make sure that everyone has those dormant nanoparticles that will be triggered by the taking of the mark of the beast, triggered through 5G broadcasting. Broadcasting a signal that will awaken those dormant nanoparticles, resulting in the third strand of DNA, resulting in the mark of the beast. But the scenario is hinted at. It's spoken of here. Can choose. Anyone can choose not only to stay alive, but to use the high tech to thrive. Nothing more and nothing less. This speaks to Revelation 9. They will seek death for 5 months and not find it. Let's go to the next question. What is the most interesting, surprising thing you've discovered about yourself since being diagnosed with MMD? His answer: I've never campaigned for anything in my life. I'm just not that sort of person. I'd never written to an MP, that's a member of Parliament in the UK, never joined a march, never gone onto social media to state a case, never given an impassioned public speak to try to change people's minds. Now I've done all those things, and I've only just got started. Why? I discovered that many people in the UK are not in the UK are simply not being given full and up-to-date information about their options, especially around TIV. Worse, I found some people who do not want to have TIV are being told, we don't offer what are tracheostomies. Okay, that's the inserting into the neck, into the throat of a breathing tube. We don't offer tracheostomies for MMD. Some struggle even to get access to cough assist machines. That's a reflex cough. I've had unbelievably wonderful support from the NHS, the National Health Service in the UK, where I live in Devon. So it blew my mind that others weren't getting the same support. I found that I just couldn't let it stand. I've started a Right to Thrive campaign, and my MP, Kevin Foster of Torby, has enthusiastically taken it to Westminster. At present, it is a local decision for a tracheostomy and cough assist to be made available to you if you have MMD. And I won't go through the rest of this. He's talking about his campaign. Let's go to the next question. What does the future of assistive technology look like in your mind? His answer: cutting edge high tech such as robotics, AI, virtual reality, and enhanced reality are all set to revolutionize MMD, offering the dream that even those who are locked in can nevertheless choose to thrive. Now let me take that sentence and let's examine this. We have seen many campaigns in genetic modification, bioengineering, synthetic life forms, etc., that put out a benevolent spin. And they talk about things like cancer and Alzheimer's disease. And now we see the spin on MMD, Lou Gehrig's disease. And that's all well and good. But understand that because we are in a fallen state, the human race is in a fallen state, it always goes to the nefarious. It always goes to the malevolent. So when we do the 180 and we look at these statements, cutting-edge high-tech such as robotics, AI, virtual reality, and enhanced reality, what comes to mind again for me is what I just said, the sentient world simulation. That's what enhanced reality is. That's augmented reality. That's plugging the mind into a different reality. That's brought about by taking the mark of the beast. So what you're seeing here is the building out of that infrastructure for the hive mind, for the locking in of human thought, human minds, human consciousness into a high-tech system of robotics, which is what Sanctuary.ai is all about, synthetic life forms. So I illustrate this again as something to bolster the case that I make in our presentation of the evidence of evil in this courtroom scenario of ours, that bolsters this case about human cyborgs, about synthetic life forms, about this transference of your mind, connecting your mind, this brain-computer interface, be it neural lace or other devices or other methodologies, such as the direct transference electronically, digitally, of your mind, of everything that is composed within your brain and its functionality into a cyborg. This is illustrating to you by way of this article and this frequently asked questions, the infrastructure that is being built out right now. And I would say is already in place. Let's continue with his answer. For those who want it, we in the MMD Association intend to make this dream come true. To that end, we're gathering some of the most innovative and influential organizations and individuals on the planet, he emphasizes, on the planet, to form a technology think tank. Now, nothing good has ever come out of a technology think tank, I'll tell you that much. Technology think tank with a very simple mission: to change the world. Is that not Luciferian, folks? To change the world. Why do you have to change the world? Why do you have to change the human race? There's 7 billion people. There's plenty of people around. We don't need synthetic life forms. They'll always tout disabilities, he calls extreme disabilities, and diseases. And sure, we benefit from medical technology today. But it goes so far beyond that in its goals, in its implications, in the price that is paid, that it certainly is nefarious and certainly is malevolent in its final goal, which is the elimination of the human race. Because we know that Satan hates God's creation. So it can only end up that way. So when you read a statement that says to change the world, that's their mission. I'll say it, I'm going to do it for emphasis. To that end, we're gathering some of the most innovative and influential organizations and individuals on the planet to form a technology think tank with a very simple mission: to change the world. when you understand through the discernment of the Holy Spirit and you read their words, you understand the implications of what they're working on. This is not hysteria. This is discernment. Let's continue. I am extraordinarily lucky to have been asked by Nick Goldup, Director of Care Improvement at the Association, to chair this think tank. And it's turning into the most exciting project I've ever been involved in throughout my entire life. We've got some really awesome corporations signing up, and we're going to tackle the most fundamental challenges facing extreme disability. What does the future of assistive technology look like? We're going to write that future. Watch this space, he says. Okay? They're going to write the future. Such is their hubris. In those days, quoting from Revelation 9:6, verse 6. In those days men will seek death and will not find it. They will long to die, but death will escape them. We apply the technology to the scriptures, and it reveals so much more. It shows us what is going on behind the curtain with the Wizard of Oz. Question: what is the most fundamental aspect of a good quality of life in your eyes? Love, he says. You can take away my ability to walk. I'll use a robotic wheelchair. Take my arms. I'll get some form of exoskeleton to help me reach out and touch those I care about. Take my voice. I'll use a pre-banked voice synthesizer to talk with them. My personality? I'm programming an avatar of my face that will smile at them and move when I speak, just as I used to. My spontaneity? AI. And eventually, I'll be even cleverer at remembering things than I am now. Eating and going to the bathroom? I've already had the first ever tripleoscopy. That's a feeding tube, suprapubic catheter, and a colostomy. And if I want to, I can now eat and go to the bathroom while I'm asleep, which is really useful if I'm busy. So, only give me love, and I'll find a way to keep giving it back, because I'll have more than enough reason to solve any challenge you throw at me. Such is the ego, my friends. Such is the ego. This is very, very telling, very, very revealing. I thought some of the other scientists that I've quoted to you in the past were full of themselves. This one is almost taking the cake. Very revealing here. Let's go on. Question: would you rather go back in time or go forward in time? His answer: I adore history, and I'd love to spend time with people like Ramesses II. Oh, okay. Great. Okay. Ramesses II, Plato, Alexander, Leonardo, and Turing. That's Alan Turing. But if you forced me to choose, I'd definitely go far forward in time. The future fascinates me, and despite how extraordinarily dumb we can be as a species, not least in maxing out the credit on our home planet account, we are indomitable. Indomitable, he says. We're like gods. I have a strong hunch that in due course we will reach out from our tiny home and spread across the stars. Either we'll find other intelligent life forms, which would be scary and awesome, or we won't, which would be equally scary and awesome. Either way will change our section and era of the universe. It's what we do. And it would be utterly amazing to see what humankind is like after it stops being so adolescent and grows up a bit? Let's go to the next question. I'm just wondering what you think could help ensure that patients living with MMD are treated in a way that's right for them. Okay, so this gets into some of the bioethics things and doctors and choices, and we've kind of made that point. Question: how do you look after your mental health when living with MMD? Answer: I'm exceptionally lucky that I happen to have a relevant professional background and a suitable mental attitude to cope with MMD. It sounds perverse, but the scientist in me finds the opportunity of spearheading cutting-edge research into applying high-tech to MMD really exciting. 99% of the time, that keeps me distracted. 1% of the time, I remember that it is me that is the subject of the experiment. But then teenage Peter gets all excited again about the super cool technology I'm going to get to try out only because I've got MMD, and suddenly living with MMD isn't all bad. Well, let me give him a break here for a moment. You know what? He's applying the 180 technique to his situation, and I applaud him for that. But I don't applaud his methodology, and I don't applaud what it portends for the human race. Now, here's a telling answer to this question. You seem very calm about MMD. Is that because you draw comfort from religion? Answer: I'm a scientist. It's the 21st century. I feel, and emphasis is here, absolutely no need for supernatural explanations of any aspect of the universe, least of all my MMD. If you think about it, not accepting mystical or paranormal reasons for why things happen sort of goes with the job description of being a scientist. Otherwise, we could all just declare victory and go home early. Don't get me wrong, I have many friends, particularly in the USA, who are religious. I get it. I totally understand why, if you're religious, it might sometimes help some people, somehow, to cope with something like MMD. But definitely not me. Given the way that my brain works, I'm really glad I'm not in the least bit religious. It would be terribly distracting to me at the moment. I'd be in total turmoil, constantly trying to work out, what does it all mean? Why me? Why now? Is it a test? Is it punishment? Should I be praying more? Should I be trying to negotiate some sort of deal with the self-same omnipotence who in her infinite wisdom gave me MMD in the first place? I'd be going absolutely bonkers. Believing that it was all part of a grand plan would only fixate me on trying to work out what the plan was. That's who I am. In contrast, I am completely at peace with the statistics of my situation. MMD is actually far more common than most people realize. It only feels rare because few of those diagnosed with it stick around long enough to become locked in. 90% die or let themselves die within 5 years. So there are never very many people with MMD around at any one time. But in fact, the likelihood of anyone contracting MMD sometime in their lives is around 1 in 300. In my book, that's quite likely. Have I been unlucky? No, not really. It just happens that it's just that I happen to be that statistical outlier. If it weren't me, it would be you or someone else. But 1 out of every 300 of us has to be special. And I get what I've got. Otherwise, 1 in 300 wouldn't be the odds Things just happen. With that said, let me be perfectly clear. I may not have religion, but I draw immense strength and comfort from my exceptionally deep faith in three things. Firstly, I have total faith in science. Not that it is right, I know it's not, but that it will keep improving. And unlike dogma, will steadily be less and less wrong. And if anything can improve my life with MMD, it can. Secondly, I have huge faith in humanity. Not that everyone is kind, I know they're not, but that despite the vile cruelty and repellent inhumanity of some, our species as a whole is quite magical, and extraordinary and indomitable. And despite our supreme stupidity sometimes, together we'll work things out. It's what we do. And thirdly, in flagrant contravention, I know, to the trite, overused Hollywood stereotype of the cold, passionless scientist, I have an unshakable faith in the power of love. Not that being touchy-feely to everyone will solve anything, I know it won't. But that when all else fails, when there is no more hope, when against all the odds no sane animal or rigorously logical robot would ever carry on, then, despite everything, the irrational, stubborn, absurd, self-sacrificing, blind, unstoppable, magnificent, all-conquering, unconditional love of one puny human being can reveal itself to be one of the most formidable forces in the universe. And just because I know it's not a miracle, but instead ultimately comes down to hormones and genetics and neural networks, does not stop it being completely mind-blowing and wonderful and glorious. That's what I adore about science. Just because you discover how magic works doesn't stop it being magic. Okay. I think that pretty well wraps that up. I'm not going to go on with the rest of them. You can read the rest of his frequently asked questions if you like. I'm imagining people like Mark Zuckerberg and his wife, Dr. Chan, who's a pediatrician, working on mapping every cell in the human body. I can imagine Elon Musk with his neural link and the brain-machine interface scenario. I can imagine Dr. George Church wanting to map the human brain, the neurons. I can imagine the Dr. Craig Venter and the mapping of the human genome and seeking through his laboratory in La Jolla, California, the Venter Institute, extending human longevity, the defeat of death. I can imagine their psychosis, their viewpoint of the human race, their view on science, their view, their paradigms, all the shared paradigms, including what I just read to you, being the paradigm produced by the Kabbalists, the Talmudic Kabbalists, who in 1840 infiltrated the hallowed halls of science and the world of academia and began to accelerate technology to its exponential rate of acceleration today. Because technology is viewed as the instrument for the redemption of the human race. I just read you virtually those same words, that it is science and technology that will redeem the human race. This is the paradigm of the Kabbalist. I'm reading to you from the Kabbalah as I read his words. It is the denial of God as the Creator. It is the denial of Jesus Christ as the Redeemer of the human race. What is left, therefore? Your logic answers the question. If it is not God, if it is not Jesus Christ, if it is not the Holy Spirit, if it is not the Holy Trinity, then what is left? What, therefore, do they worship? What spirit drives them? What spirit do they worship? What idols do they set up and worship? All of these you can answer yourself. This is one of the most extraordinary articles and list of frequently asked questions that I have ever read in all of my years of research. In all of the personalities within the world of modern technology that I have read about, articles, examinations, biographies, autobiographies that I've read, this is the most telling about the present mindset within the world of technology. It speaks volumes to the spirit that is pushing technology. It speaks volumes to the Kabbalistic indoctrination, manipulation, and control of technology today. You're seeing it firsthand through these live streams. For those that wonder, and rightfully so, both in our Patreon group and outside, those that wonder, is the study of quantum mechanics as the umbrella over all scientific disciplines, and under that umbrella, within it, all of the scientific disciplines themselves, is it relevant to study science, to study technology, to study the broader, which is quantum mechanics, that drives all of the science today? Is it relevant to the study of scriptures? Is it relevant to the teaching and the spreading of the gospel? Is it relevant to today's Christian churches? Is it relevant for a pastor to even consider the technologies in teaching congregations? I leave it to you to answer that. If the Kabbalists, who are pushing the world into the Noahide laws, if that spiritual and political agenda, and I'm not going to use the political agenda word, you know what I'm talking about. If that Antichrist system has infiltrated the world's governments, I don't care what country, what society, what culture, they are all fully infiltrated by the Kabbalists. That's the diaspora that occurred. This is the spirit that is at work, and this is the false idols that have been set up. These are the false prophets in science. But they have been infiltrated and indoctrinated and now manipulated into this way of thinking, which is the paradigm of the Kabbalist, that the only solution, the only salvation, the only redemption of the human race is not through Jesus Christ, but through technology. Author Deanne Loper, her book, I referred to you, we had her on as a guest. Let me get the book. If you haven't purchased this book, and again, I get nothing for promoting this, but we went through this, Kabbalah Secrets Christians Need to Know by Deanne Loper, an in-depth study of the kosher pig and the gods of Jewish mysticism. Okay? Tikkun, redemption, human race. In here, defined for you. It is not redemption through Jesus Christ. It is redemption through technology. And is the mission of Kathleen and myself to share the spiritual and the scientific. Because the scientific is driven by, formulated by, infiltrated, indoctrinated, manipulated by the Luciferian spirit, the Antichrist spirit. The Kabbalists want to usher in, through the exponential growth of technology, want to usher in the return of their Mashiach, their Antichrist. The faster they can push technology, the sooner the return of their false Messiah. Plain and simple. And this has infiltrated every society on the planet. And it's becoming more apparent, and you know this, becoming more and more apparent, and it's not that far in the future when the Noahide laws will be the preeminent law of the land around the planet. And how is that put into place? Through technology. And this human cyborg or synthetics synths scenario is more advanced than we are privy to. These are the days of Noah. I need to go to my notes again real quickly here. These are the days of Noah. And what happened in the days of Noah? Genetic modification. Cyborgs, if you will. We don't know all the technologies that were at play during the days of Noah, but we know the fruits of the technologies, and we understand why God brought in the flood. It was to get rid of those biologicals. And it's being repeated again today. Okay? Here are what I will call the markers of the days of Noah. Evil called good, and good called evil. Corruption and collapse of culture. Focus on self and money. Loving what God hates. Rise of evil and lawlessness. And finally, rise of strong delusion. There are various aspects to the word delusion, but I'm offering to you, by way of reading all of this tonight, another example of strong delusion. Human cyborgs and synthetics. Okay? All right. I'd like to take some time for questions this evening. I know there have been a number of questions that have been sent by email, but sometimes there are things that are prompted in what I present. So I'm going to go ahead and watch the chat room for a few moments and see what you guys may have in the way of questions. Okay, Susan, can you explain how the Noahide laws will be put into place by AI? Very good question. Okay. Can I explain how the Noahide laws will be put into place by AI? Laws are meant to control, and there is accountability to the laws. and thus there is a judgment, there is a penalty, there's a price to be paid for the violation of a law. In order to hold people accountable to any law, there needs to be surveillance, observation, enforcement of those laws, apprehension and arrest. But let's look at surveillance. AI, when it was first developed, we're not talking about controlling machines, machine learning AI, but advancing in the last 15 years of AI. As classical computers and now quantum computers have advanced, so has AI. But it learned in the beginning by observing humans. That's surveillance. Its basic core foundation is surveillance, AI. So in order to enforce the Noahide laws, you have to be able to monitor people. This is what the sentient world simulation is all about. Every person on the planet, and this goes back to 2007. This originated, the SWS, as a white paper published in 2006 out of Purdue University. It went live in 2007. Every person on the planet is represented in the software as a node, and every person is then given an avatar. Okay? The purpose of the avatars is to surveil people by their individual personalities, behavior patterns, their DNA, their unique markers. Okay? Already in place. So the ability to track people, to surveil and track people. And if you can surveil, you can determine whether or not they're in violation of a Noahide law. From there goes the enforcement. Now, something Kathleen has brought up in the discussion of this topic, this question, is the enforcement end of it. Because those who are Gentiles, and even if you're a Christian who has been converted to Judaism, which is widespread now in the Christian community, converting of Christians to Judaism, which is Antichrist. Even those converts, former Christians, and even the greater body of Gentiles, as viewed by the Kabbalists, if they are found in violation of the Noahide laws, the penalty is decapitation. Kathleen and I have put out and I don't think it's a stretch, but we've put out the concept that because Freemasonry was born out of Kabbalism, Freemasonry, its origins is in Kabbalah, plain and simple. The Masonic temples have been set up for the purpose of execution. This is where the beheadings will take place, in Masonic temples. Okay? AI is the surveillance and therefore the enforcement system of the Noahide laws. You have to have artificial intelligence to be able to track every person on the planet. That's already in place. And it continues to become more advanced and sophisticated. Okay? Alrighty. Let's see, what have we got here? Okay, let me go back. Just going to repeat this. Dr. Peter Scott Morgan, M-O-R-G-A-N. Dr. Peter Scott is the gentleman who's recreating himself into Peter 2.0, a cyborg. Okay? You're welcome, Susan. I hope that helps. Let's see, Tamara, Illuminati the same as Masons? Yes, Illuminati is born out of the Kabbalists, and let me get myself back on camera here. Understand that the overarching umbrella, the one world religion in the shadows, has been Kabbalism, the Kabbalah. That's been the one world religion in the shadows. The Illuminati and the Freemason are outgrowths of that. They are subsets. We look at Crowley with the Theosophical Society, the Golden Dawn Society, and Madame Blavatsky with the Theosophical Society. That's all subsets of Kabbalism. Okay? So is Illuminati the same as the Masons? Only in the sense of their point of origin. And in their advancement, the Illuminati and the Masons are advancing technology. If you look at both groups, they both are heavily steeped in the advancement of technology, the Illuminists and the Masons. And why? Because technology is about redemption. The Masons are tied into the Tree of Life, which is Kabbalist. The Tree of Life is where the forbidden knowledge comes from. The Tree of Life and the Tree of Good and Evil, the Tree of Knowledge. They worship the same spirit, the Illuminati and the Masons, which is the Kundalini spirit, which is the spirit of the Tree of Life. The whole notion of ascending, whether you're Illuminist or Mason, is Kabbalism. The ascension through technology, the tikkun. Okay? Any other questions? Happy to take them. The Tree of Knowledge. Right. It's the Tree of Knowledge that we're talking about. Yeah. Alrighty. Well, if there are no other questions, I think we'll go ahead and wrap it up for the evening. Again, I want to make good use of your time. I don't want to just sit here and, you know, pontificate, as I like to say. Okay. Tamara, did I get all your questions taken care of? I hope so. Never want to shortchange anyone. Alrighty. So, thank you. Thank you. And please pray for Pam. Pray for others that are in our Patreon group that are suffering from illnesses and injuries. And pray for the well-being of all of us in this group. Certainly we are being reviled by those, even in the Christian circles, because we take a different stance in terms of what's going on in the world. The greater body of Christianity, unfortunately, is suffering under the great delusion. They're being deceived into false idol worship, the worship of false idols. They're supporting the wrong organizations. I'll put it that way, because I don't want to go off onto a long dissertation of things that we've covered before. Okay? Yes, pontification, I guess another t-shirt, pontification, along with hubris, along with 180, along with fly patch air. We're at 40,000 feet. We don't fly at just 30,000 feet. Should have a lot of t-shirts for Christmas. What do you think? Should we go to Teespring and have a bunch of t-shirts made available? Should we merchandise the heck out of ourselves for Christmas? We'll see. Okay. Alrighty, so we'll wrap it up on a kind of a light note there. Let me share with you, speaking of light notes, I love this cartoon. I shared it before, but this is from Dilbert. How's your quantum computer prototype coming along? The boss asks the engineer. Great. The project exists in a simultaneous state of being both totally successful and not even started. And the boss says, can I observe it? And the engineer says, that's a tricky question. I love it. I love it. It's great stuff. All right, guys. Let's wrap it up for the evening. Thank you very much for all your friendship and also for allowing me the latitude to kind of share over into the Caravan to Midnight organization with John B. Wells. And I think you would appreciate his commentary. And he's on YouTube with his daily news segment for an hour every day. Well, pretty much every day. So you get a flavor. If you've never experienced Caravan to Midnight and John B. Wells, you can see him on YouTube, for free, and then he does his interviews with great guests on Caravan to Midnight, which is a membership-driven organization. Sherry has a question. Okay, Sherry. Okay, let's see. Sherry, where's your question? CRISPR. Where is the question? Anthony, a CRISPR question. All right, so I'll take care of it by email. All righty. Prosperity Now says, I found you on Caravan to Midnight. Thank you very much. That's great. Again, John focuses on, world events and in particular politics, but he's definitely from a Christian perspective. He's always citing Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. You'd be in good company with him, and that's why. And I've known John for years, and we've been to conferences together, and all that good stuff. So I think it's a good, comfortable place to get the political news, get the political insight, and he has great guests in there that are very informative, and you can have access to all of his archive material as well. So I think it's complimentary, and we're kind of testing the waters and see how it goes. Okay? Alrighty. Give her a moment to type it. Okay. I'm not going to rush anybody. Sherry, if you want to type in the question right here, we have plenty of time. Okay. Fast fingers. Must be a long question. We'll see. I will say John gets pretty worked up, and he can be a little more rough around the edges than me, and that's okay. I mean, he doesn't have to talk like I do, and I don't talk like he does. We're different people, but I think it's good stuff. There's an Illuminati temple in Israel. Well, I don't doubt that at all. Also, I'd like to give you a little bit of information that I discovered today about Israel and the United States military. Apparently, we have several large secret military bases in Israel. They must be underground, because Israel's not that big. And these are apparently very large military installations that the U.S. military has in Israel. So more underground facilities there. Something that Iran should pay close attention to. Also, I'll just throw a couple of news items in. U.S. military troops pulled from Syria. Well, that was only in the north, not in the south. We have a couple of very large military bases in the southern half of Syria, and those troops are still there. There was a very small contingent, perhaps as small as 26 military individuals, military troops in northern Syria that were pulled. U.S. has not pulled out of Syria. We still have our forces in force in southern Syria. We haven't pulled out. Okay? All right, let's see. What do we have here? My friend has a child with genetic disorder. He's on a list 4, and I'm not seeing the rest of this. I'm not seeing the rest of the question. But again, to continue talking about Syria, the Iranians have over 100,000 troops in southern Syria. We haven't left Syria. Russia is coming in to fill the vacuum in northern Syria. And Russia, of course, is an ally of Iran. Turkey has 50, because they're a NATO ally, they have 50 U.S.-made nuclear warheads in Turkey. And the Turks have said they're going to hold those nuclear devices hostage. Their words. If they don't get their way, they're going to do something with those nukes. They're going to hold them hostage. Now, the U.S. military has said that those nukes are not at risk. They're perfectly safeguarded. You know, Turkey's a NATO ally. Is the U.S. going to pull those, try and attempt to pull those nukes out of Turkey? Because we provided those nukes to Turkey. Watch that dynamic about the nuclear warheads in Turkey. That could be a very, very touchy situation. There's discussion about ousting from NATO, ousting Turkey. Remember, earlier this year, the Turks took delivery of an S-400 missile system from Russia. How can a NATO member, and NATO is put together, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization was put together in defense of NATO countries against Russia. And yet you have a member of NATO who is buying and has purchased an S-400 missile system from the supposed enemy of NATO. How does that work? Personally, I think we should pull those 50 nukes immediately out of Turkey, so they're not used against our own people. Trump has said that he would destroy the Turkish economy through sanctions, and we have some limited sanctions in place against Turkey, have for a couple of years now, but he said he's going to up the ante on those. Well, the first thing he should do is pull the nukes out of there and push them out of NATO, because they're not our allies. They're aligned with Russia more than they are aligned with us or the other NATO members. This is how touchy the situation is in Syria. Anyway, okay. CRISPR trial. Do you believe any use of it to manipulate the gene can be good? CRISPR. Yes, I think CRISPR does have some benevolent applications. I think that if you are looking at a situation where a loved one is in an end stage situation, whatever the disease is, not sure what it is, but it's a CRISPR trial, so I would assume that your loved one is at an end stage development of a disease. And therefore, I don't have a problem with that, using CRISPR technology with an end stage patient. To me, it's like, should you have a heart bypass? Should you have a heart transplant? Should you have a kidney or liver transplant? Certainly. Should, to a limited degree, CRISPR technology be used in an extremis situation to try to save a life? Sure. I don't have a problem with that. I have a problem with vaccines because it's not transparent. It's the hidden aspects of the vaccines that's doing damage, specifically, in most cases, neurological damage. But CRISPR, in this situation that you're describing, would be a transparent application of the technology, is my assumption, not having the details. I would say ask a lot of questions, do your own research. If you want to send information to me by email so I can take a closer look at the situation. I'm not a doctor. I'm not rendering medical advice. I'm just stating a layman's opinion. Okay? That's the best I can do. Okay? All right. So let's see what we're going on here. Tamara has a question. Am I able to post it on Patreon? The best thing you can do is post it to me through email information, and then I can make the posting on Patreon. Okay? Posting as a first comment, a first post, isn't available through Patreon, but I'm happy to do that if it's appropriate. Let me say that. If it's appropriate, I'll go ahead and post it for the benefit of the patrons to read your information. Okay? Is there a hidden DNA program in CRISPR? Yes, there is. CRISPR is what I refer to now as kind of the old technology. I refer to CRISPR as Model T level genetic modification. It's taking large segments, large strands of DNA and splicing together. What is going on now that I've described for you for a long time is the 3D bioprinting from in silico modeling of DNA. That's far and away more advanced than CRISPR technology. CRISPR is very rudimentary level modification of DNA. What I'm talking about is getting down to the building blocks, the base pairs of DNA. Okay? Alrighty. All right. Okay, well, I'll say thank you, and we'll get together, Lord willing, again tomorrow on Thursday, and we'll have a lot more to discuss. I sent you the links to the articles that I cited at the beginning in our news segment, but please read through that whole background that I provided to you on Dr. Peter Scott Morgan, and go to his blog and take a look at his background. It tells a lot. Okay? All right. All righty. We'll say good evening and God bless you all. Bye-bye.